Okay, members of council, good morning. This meeting is now resumed. Members of council, we will now review and confirm the order paper. There are 18 items left on the agenda, including 7 member motions. Council will recess for lunch from 12:30 to 1:30. And members, I want to remind you that today's meeting must end by 7:30 in order to permit religious observance. There are a number of planning items that must be dealt with on a priority basis so that the city solicitor can submit the bills to for this meeting. We will deal with those matters first, starting with PH 3516. We did have questions yesterday, so we're just going to speakers on 3516. I will now take the release of member holds. Please put your name on the list. Okay, so we'll go to the speakers list for PH 3560. Oh, on favor of adopting the order paper? Carrie, thank you. We'll put the speakers list up for 3516. Yeah, so Councillor Bylaw, did you want to speak first on this item? No? Okay. So Councillor Grimes.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. And I just had a motion. I asked my question of the chief planner yesterday. So with that, I just want to thank staff for working with the Residents Association to come to some peace in the valley and ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Amendment by Councillor Grimes on the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So do we have any questions on Councillor Grimes' motion? No. Okay. So could I put, whoever wants to speak, can they put their name on the list? Councillor Bylaw wants to speak last. Councillor Fletcher, did you want to speak on this because you asked questions yesterday? No? Anybody else that wants to speak on this item? Okay, Councillor Bylaw. I don't see anybody else, so do you want to speak?
I'd just like to move a motion that staff had asked me to move. That needs to be added to the report. And that's it.
Okay, so we have the motion by Councillor Bylaw. Okay. So if we can put the motions on the screen and we'll vote on the motions then. Motion by Councillor Grimes, on favor, recorded vote.
Councillor Ainsley, may we have your vote verbally, please?
Affirmative.
Thank you. Councillor Fillion, may we have your vote verbally, please? Sorry, can you say that into your microphone?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Fletcher, your vote, please.
In the affirmative.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if I could vote, it's Councillor Bradford in the affirmative.
Oh, hello, Councillor Bradford. Thank you.
Nice hat.
Mayor Tory, can you please give us your vote verbally?
Yes, in the negative.
Thank you. Motion 1 carries. The vote is 17-3.
Okay. On the motion by Counselor Bailao, on favor, show of hands, carried. Item as amended, on favor, carried. So our next item that we need to deal with is EY 33.4. Counselor Holliday, you held the item down. It's 900, 940, the East Mall. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, we're doing all the applications that we need to get the bill approved. Yeah. Okay, does anybody have any questions on EY 33.4? No questions, so Counselor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have two motions to present. I guess it's one motion with two parts. The first part is from the solicitor, and the second part is something that I wrote. So the first part has to do with the agreements of purchase and sale and authorizing the Housing Secretariat to execute them. And the second part is to ask the Director of Community Planning to continue discussions with the applicant related to site plan. Members, I see this item is before you, and I will suggest that you vote your conscience on this with the report before you, but this has been a very difficult application for the community. It is a very, very dense creation of a new development, and among the difficulties that I've had with this is that it's right at the juncture of the 427 highway and the 401 highway. And the lands actually do not permit residential, and that's why it's an official plan amendment. But I think the largest difficulty in discussion with the community is that it is very isolated. It's a long distance to the nearest shopping plaza. It is just under 800 meters to the nearest transit station. And it's the subject that's driven many conversations at this council for me about trying to ensure that there's infrastructure in the neighborhood to serve the new developments that we put in. But the residents of the neighborhood need to be commended for coming forward, and they have offered criticism of the design through the process and has led to some really important improvements, including the driveway alignments at a highway ramp to make things safer. And I really hope that the work continues by planning staff. So I have some personal difficulties supporting this. I think that it could have been better the way that it turned out, but I will also offer my express thanks to both the applicant and staff for giving their best efforts working on this up to this date. So I hope you'll support my two motions. I think they're helpful in making the best out of the situation. And I look forward to continue to work on this application to make it the best that it can be. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a recorded vote, Madam Speaker?
Yes. Okay. So on Counselor Holliday's amendment, recorded vote. Can you share? Can you?
Counselor Bradford, your vote, please.
In the affirmative.
Thank you. Counselor Matlow, your vote, please.
Yes.
And Counselor Fillion, please. Sorry, Counselor Fillion, we'll take your vote verbally. We've closed the vote.
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously, 21 in favor.
May I have a recorded vote on the item as amended, please?
Recorded vote on the item as amended.
And Counselor Matlow, may I have your vote, please?
Yes.
Affirmative, thank you. The item as amended carries. The vote is 19 to 2.
Our next item is NY 33.3, Counselor Pasternak. This is 2808 and 2810 Keel Street.
Yes,
Counselor
I
Pasternak, do you have questions to staff?
No questions to staff. I have a motion to support the community with a continued working group to ensure that the green standard is maintained, there's pedestrian access, that the landscape plan is adhered to, that the mid-rise guidelines are followed. So I'd like a recorded vote on both the motion, and I'd like to be recorded in the negative on the item as amended.
Okay, do we have any further speakers on the item? No, okay, so on the amendment by Counselor Pasternak, NY 33.3, recorded vote.
Counselor Fletcher, may I have your vote verbally, please?
In the affirmative.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously, 21 in favor.
Okay, item is amended, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Min Wong, please. Thank you. The item as amended carries. The vote is 20-1.
Our next item is NY 34.2, 1350 Shepherd Avenue West. Okay, do we have, Councillor Pasternak, do you have any questions to staff?
Yes, but the item is not ready. We're still waiting on some technical amendments. You want to start the,
Well, let's start with the questions, and then if you don't have your motion ready, we'll hold the item down.
all right.
Do you have questions?
Okay, yeah, I have a
Okay.
few questions.
Okay.
Through you to staff, if there's any staff around, I don't see them.
I don't know where the staff is.
Anyone from planning?
There you go.
Speaker, it's Greg Blanchard and David Sitt from North York.
Okay, through you to staff, under this agreement, does the city of Toronto gain parkland?
Through the speaker to Councillor Pasternak, yes, it does.
Now, one of the big concerns of the community is protection of the historical woodlot that's also on this site. Does this agreement secure and protect the ancient woodlot, the historical woodlot on the William Baker site?
Through the speaker to the councillor, yes, it does. The woodlot will be transferred to the city under ownership.
So when it comes to affordable housing, I understand that we've broken new ground by getting to the 20% rate of all units built on this site. Would you think that the city and the people of Toronto got a good deal with that?
Through the speaker to the councillor, I would agree that the number is either 220 units or 20% of the overall development of the site area.
So these are affordable units. What could you just characterize? Is this like a housing now type unit below market for, I guess, middle income earners? Would you describe how this would work?
Through the speaker to the councillor, the average market rent for the affordable units will be 80% average market rent.
Okay. When it comes to the community center, the Downsies been waiting for a community center at the corner of Shepherd and Keel for 20 years. The Section 37 is very much geared towards that. When I arrived, I guess there was about $1 million in the community center account. What will this agreement do to move the community center building forward?
Through the speaker and to the councillor, an additional $7 million will be provided through Section 37 money to go towards the community center.
Now, the relationship between the City of Toronto and Canada Lands or the federal government has not always been great. Would you say that this secures the best deal that we could possibly get for Downsview and for the City of Toronto?
Through speaker to the councillor, I would agree that we have achieved a very good package here. As I've already mentioned, there is the money that's being provided for the community center, but also for affordable housing, bridge improvements, and public art as well as the woodlot protection.
Right. And would you say the negotiations were fairly protracted and long-term, and that the federal government was determined to build on this site, and it was best for us to sit down and negotiate rather than fight and let it go to appeal?
Through the speaker, I would say that yes, there was some protracted negotiations, and certainly with our legal staff, planning staff, and park plan staff, we've negotiated something that I think everybody is satisfied with, including Canada Lands.
Including the local councillor. Thank you very much.
Including the local councillor.
Thank you.
Do we have Councillor Pasternak's motion ready yet? No? Okay, so we'll go to the other one, and then we'll come back to yours. The next one is T 3444, which is 1406, 1428 Young Street. It's here without a recommendation. Counselor Matlow, questions?
Madam Speaker, I'm literally going back and forth with staff as we speak, trying to iron out a motion. Can we hold this down and go to the next item? Hopefully, this will be resolved in
Okay,
the next 10, 15 minutes.
okay. Yeah, but what about the next one? Maybe it's
Thank you.
related? Okay. All right, so then what we're going to do is that we're going to go back to planning and housing, Counselor Bailao, and we'll go to PH 3518, held by Counselor Bailao, creating a framework to protect affordable mid-range rental homes. So do we have any questions? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, you have questions?
I do.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, my questions, let me first ask, there's some items related to rent control, requests to freeze rental property rents, properties, and also reintroduce rent control to cover units occupied after November the 15th. So can you tell me what consultations you've done on this?
Through the speaker, Councillor, so we have had a Renters Advisory Committee that we've been working with through the last term, who provided us with feedback on this report and others as they relate to rental housing policy.
Have you gone to the broader community, or have you asked the industry that actually constructs and provides rental housing what their views are?
Through the speaker, we do have regular contact with developers who, both non-profit and for-profit developers who are interested in building affordable housing. We operate an incentive program, Open Door, so we have a lot of engagement with developers. The things that we're asking for in this report are really to initiate...
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, I only have 5 minutes and I've got a lot of questions. My question was fairly specific. As it relates to rent control and these particular items, did you ask their opinion and what they thought about this and what the impact would be on providing rental housing? Did you or didn't you?
Through the speaker, yes, we have spoken to rental developers about the items in this report.
And what did they say?
So we've heard a mixture of feedback. We've heard that there is some concern that some of the things in this report that we're asking for could inhibit the investment into new rental housing. And we've also heard from other developers that they would like to work with us more on some of the ideas that we've put forward in this report.
And with regard to how much will this cost? Obviously, doing this will be quite very expensive, creating a huge infrastructure and bureaucracy in terms of implementing this. Have you done any analysis on how much this is going to cost, how many people, and how many people we're going to have to hire to manage this?
Through the speaker, Councillor, if you're referring to the renoviction work in here and the heart table, we have started that work, but we would complete that in the run-up to the next budget, and any costs necessary to support that work would come forward during the next budget process.
So you haven't done the analysis?
Through the speaker, we haven't completed that work, no.
Let me ask you if you're familiar with what happened the last time rent control was put into place. How many rental units got built after its introduction and in the 40 years after that?
Through the speaker, we have, as a team, we look at the data around rental housing delivery in Toronto and also the country as well. there was a substantive amount of rental housing delivered in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which then tailored off in the 90s and 2000s. There are a number of reasons for that. At the time, there was vacancy control measures were removed in the late 1990s. There was also a significant tailing off of federal, national, and provincial housing programs, and also the introduction of the Condominium Act. All of those had an impact on the delivery of rental housing in our city and the country.
It's fairly well accepted that because of rent control that was put in, virtually no rental apartments were built in the city of Toronto because of rent control. Is that what you're trying to do in this arrangement? Because that's what it looks like to me.
Through the speaker, no, that isn't what we're trying to do. After vacancy control was removed in the late 90s, we haven't seen the resurgence of the rental supply that we like and we would need. So we feel that there is more that needs to happen to support rental supply, including additional incentives potentially provided at a federal level. There isn't sufficient incentives across the board to deliver that kind of supply, but meanwhile, that vacancy control removal means that the existing low and middle income rental housing is losing its affordability. And so we're experiencing the worst of both worlds. We're losing affordability and not delivering the kind of supply that we need. So this is a suggestion from us to begin an engagement process. We would love to be involved in the conversation with the province and also the industry to see how this could work to support existing rental and be a made in Toronto solution for our rental housing system, making it healthier.
Thank you. That was your last
So
question. Sorry, you had 5.5 minutes.
That's fine. I appreciate the extra 30 minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Lai, questions?
Thank you, Speaker. Most of my questions are being asked by Deputy Mayor Min Wong. I just want to zoom in at one question is about recommendation 9 on the vacancy decontrol. And staff did say that they did some form of a consultation with rental housing owners and providers in the city and the tenants as well. What about those private owners? Will that one of those stakeholders, including the private owners for organizations such as, let's say, Ontario Real Estate Association or Toronto Real Estate Board?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Speaker, we haven't done formal consultation on this partly because the city is not in a position to be able to bring forward legislation as it relates to this topic. This would have to be done led by the provincial government, and at that time, in relation to any legislation, we would support kind of formal engagement and consultation. We're just bringing this forward as a request to ask them to consider this measure and potentially to work with us and other stakeholders on this topic so that we can get to a more healthy rental market.
So whose request is it that arrived at this report?
And through the Speaker, sorry, Councillor, could you repeat that question?
Whose request? You said there's a request on that to making more, on the housing policy. Whose request is this for you to arrive at this report?
Through the Speaker, so there are a number of policy objectives outlined in Housing TO, and we have been working on those alongside with the Rental Advisory Committee. There are a number of stakeholders that are listed as being consulted in this report, including that Tenants Advisory Committee, landlords, both non-profit and private, as well as landlord and tenant associations, housing and homeless organizations, advocacy groups, and community legal clinics. So we have done some broad consultation. Most of that was focused on the renoviction element of this report, but it was initiated by the Subcommittee on Affordable Rental Housing.
So you did say that you did not do any consultation. You did say that you did consultation on the private owners, but you told me that you have not dealt, extensively get consultation from organizations such as Toronto Real Estate Board or Ontario Real Estate Association. Is that correct?
So through the speaker, maybe I can clarify. The direction to us to bring forward work on renovation policy was through Planning and Housing Committee. And so the stakeholders that we identified in this report were primarily consulted on that policy work. Some of the specific stakeholders that you mentioned in relation to vacancy control, we would anticipate if the provincial government was interested in bringing forward legislation, that there would be full consultation with all key stakeholders on that topic separately.
So my last question would be, you think that this will be an example of, putting the cart before the horse to make a recommendation without background information on such an important housing policy?
Through the speaker, to you, Councillor, we're making the request of the provincial government to consider this. We're not in a position to bring forward any legislation ourselves, as this is outside our jurisdiction. So this is there are a number of measures in here that we're asking the provincial government to consider, including additional legal support for tenants. All of those are aimed at having a better discussion, a more robust discussion about the health of our rental market, and we would welcome any further engagement on any of the items that we have called for the province to consider.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Those are my
you.
questions, Speaker.
Councillor Robinson, questions?
Yeah, I just wondered a bit about your knowledge of Midtown. And there's 3 councillors that represent that. We're all facing similar situations. And on this North York agenda, the North York Community Council agenda, we were looking at demolition of rentals. So are you tracking what's happening at Midtown specifically and the number of buildings that are coming down that renters are now living in and have lived in, some of them for 30 years? Are you tracking the losses that we're witnessing in that area specifically?
Through the speaker, I might ask my planning colleagues to comment specifically in terms of the rental demolition and replacement policy, but I think what you're highlighting is concerns from staff that we're seeing across the city right now in relation to the loss of affordability and also the demolition of rental housing stock. So that's one of the reasons that we're bringing forward this report, as we would like to explore measures to stabilize the rental housing system, partly because almost 50% of the people who live in our city live in rental housing. I don't know if Mr. Linton would like to comment on the rental replacement and demolition.
Only to add to the Speaker, Councillor Robinson, that all of the applications that are subject to the city's rental housing replacement policies that have been considered on the agenda have been brought forward in the context of that policy. So all of the units that are subject to replacement, we've gone through our replacement procedure with them and we put to council approvals in that context. So generally speaking, replacement of units, same size, same rent, offers back to existing tenants and the other policies that we adhere to. I do acknowledge that it is there is a concentrated amount of that activity in Yonge and Eglinton, and certainly as Ms. Bond points out, we want to maintain the rental housing supply in the city. We need all kinds of housing for all kinds of people. That is generally speaking what we try to maintain and sustain and actually grow. So this is just one part of the toolkit, but it's an important part as these sites come under redevelopment that we replace those units best we can.
So I think what you're saying is you're not tracking the volume, the sheer volume of what's happening at Yonge and Eglinton, which is heartbreaking, quite frankly, to watch and to be at these meetings. But you're not tracking it. But you are identifying there is an excessive amount happening.
No, I think we are tracking it. I can get you the number. I think we were asked this in the context of this total meeting, what the number of replacement units we're proposing to be approved in the context of all of the development applications before council. So I'm just waiting on that number from my staff, but and certainly we can keep the 3 Yonge and Eglinton councillors up to date on what that whole picture looks like. And Yonge and Eglinton, very happy to do that.
Okay, I think we'd all appreciate it to know the, the big picture numbers. We know what's happening in our respective wards, but it's unsettling. Do you think the process in place to assist tenants when this happens, and again, it's just heartbreaking when these things happen because people have lived at Yonge and Eglinton their entire lives, some of them, raised their families there, all their connections are there. Do you think the process that staff assist with is fine-tuned? Is it where it needs to be, or does it need work?
Through the speaker, I mean, we're constantly looking at the process. We do get very, I would say, intimately involved with these developments because it is quite a hardship for existing residents to be confronted with the demolition of their homes and ultimate replacement. I just got the general number on this meeting. The 775 units are being replaced if you total up all of the rental replacement units that are happening with all of the approvals that are before council during this meeting. So it's quite a lot, and staff are quite committed to working through the individual projects. We have committed staff, devoted staff who do work on the rental replacement files.
Can I just ask you one more question?
Sure,
Sorry.
sure.
Is that number, the number you just cited, is that in the pipeline, or is that currently or in the pipeline? Because as we all know, there's a lot of applications in the pipeline.
I believe that number is associated with the applications that are before council at this meeting.
Okay, wow.
So
Okay.
there are a number of applications that involve rental replacement, so that's the number that's associated with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to know the big number at some point. Would be terrific. Thank you.
We'll get that for you, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matlow, questions?
Thanks, Madam Speaker. To Abby, and thank you so much for the work that you've done on this and your proposals. It's appreciated by a lot of people. Is it not true, just to be clear, like the core issue with vacancy decontrol is that it creates extraordinary incentives for landlords to move on rent evictions or landlord-owned use evictions, so that they can hike rents and put people out of their homes.
Through the speaker, to you, Councillor Matlow, yeah, we've identified in this report that we think vacancy control measures that aren't in place do contribute to the financialization of housing and rental housing in particular. We feel that there may well be policy area to be explored here as to how we can stabilize the affordable end of the rental housing continuum, but also maintain incentives and investment for the creation of new. That isn't something that has really been done yet, but we feel there's real potential there. So we're highlighting this in the report so that we can have more policy discussions about this.
And is it also not true, Abby, that for a lot of tenants, the vulnerability of the status quo means that their agency is vulnerable as well, meaning that similar to Premier Ford's decision to remove rent control on all new units, if a tenant is worried that their landlord is going to hike their rent, or in this case, renovate them, or come up with an excuse such as a family member, whether it be true or not, moving in, that they may not want to rightfully complain about a broken appliance or ruffle any feathers, ask for help when they need it because they want to stay off the radar. Is that not true, that tenants, that is something that many tenants need to consider, sadly?
Through the speaker to you, Councillor Matlow, yeah, we've heard from a number of tenants and tenant organisations that the current situation for tenants, the low vacancy rate, the high rental increases are creating a really difficult situation for them and may, as you identify, lead to them trying to fly below the radar so that, they don't put themselves and their loss of their housing at risk. That's one of the reasons we identified in the report a need for additional housing support services to support tenants through a potential eviction process as well, and to improve the funding for advocacy and legal clinics as well, so that we can better support tenants, basically, utilizing the rights that are given to them under the Residential Tenancy Act.
And then my final question is rhetorical. You need not respond to it. Do you know how much I appreciate the work that you've done?
Through the speaker, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Question?
Who? Oh, Councillor Cole. Question.
Yes, to Greg Lintern, a classic case about losing affordable rental housing is happening at 500 duplex, whereby they're going to demolish 200 or so rental townhomes to build 2 condos stuck to an already 34-story rental building. Anyways, if this person, the applicant obviously has to get permission for demolishing the rental housing. Is that appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
Through the speaker, this file is under appeal, so I'll be careful about what I say about the file in particular. But are you asking if the rental housing replacement is appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
Yeah, well, let's say that it's denied, the application to demolish the rental housing is denied by City Council. Can the applicant then appeal that to the Ontario Land Tribunal? Although, as you said, they're already there. They even went there before we had the public meeting. In fact, they just now think the Ontario Land Tribunal does the planning in Toronto. But anyways, that's another story.
Yeah, Councillor, the rental housing application authority is under the City of Toronto Act, I believe. Therefore, that appeal procedure is through the courts, not through the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Oh, so therefore, if the demolition is denied, the applicant then goes to the Ontario Court of which court is Divisional Court? Yeah, it can go to Divisional Court, right?
You're getting into matters of legal procedure, which I would prefer to have the city solicitor answer.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, I'll be back to Abby or yourself just to get some clarification on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go to speakers. Councillor Bailao. You held the item down? Pardon? Speak last? Okay, if we can clear the screen. Oh, are these speakers on the list?
Well,
Wow, okay. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is clerks ready with my motion? Because I've been going back and forth with them.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's on the
perfect. Thank you
screen.
very much. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. In some ways, this is only a request for the province to do something. And Ms. Bond said it was consider. I would sort of, when you look at the wording, it's not, it's delete. So it's to do these things. And so this is an arrangement where they want to city wants to reintroduce rent control to cover units occupied after November 15th. And then they want to put rent controls in attached to the unit. So freeze them forever to rent control forever. Okay, so it's just a request, but personally, this is a big deal. And if anybody wants to understand the consequences of it, you don't have to look far for the research. All you have to ask yourself is, how did we get into this mess of not having any rental housing? We got into this mess because of rent control. Because remarkably, The industry wasn't building any rental housing because they couldn't get a good enough return on it. And what do we want? Rental housing. And what do we want to do? We want to make it less attractive for developers to build rental housing. We are actually doing something contrary to what we want, a public policy goal we want to achieve. I think it's a really shallow play to use this as a newsletter thing, something you can put in your newsletter and say, we asked the province to put in rent control. No, this is much more serious. The consequences of this could be significant if the province does this. And we have to understand this. The other thing that we should also be concerned with in understanding this is there is hardly any research presented in this report. How does that happen? On what is recognized as one of the top issues in the city in terms of building rental housing, there is virtually no research in terms of what the consequences of this will be. How can that be? We should not accept that. We should be, and we're not having real, meaningful, authentic discussions with the very people that we need to build this rental housing and what the impact will be. Yet this is in front of us on the last day of council. These are. I mean, I actually think that the provincial government's going to be a lot smarter than this, and they're going to look at this and they're going to fundamentally ignore this, and I hope they do. These are serious issues. We should be a serious council. This shouldn't be before us without carefully considering the consequences of this, because the last time we did it, it froze rental housing in the most dramatic way we could have ever seen, and we've had to deal with that problem for decades. Let's delete these sections, and if the next council wants to deal with it in a serious, not in a shallow way, but with great depth and thoughtfulness, we should deal with it during the next council. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Minnan Wong. The next speaker is Councillor Bradford.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start off actually by thanking our Housing Secretariat, Abby Bond, for this very thoughtful body of work, addressing one of the most pressing challenges facing our affordability crisis here in the city of Toronto. And obviously there's a lot of work to do on the housing front. We've been very fortunate to have our Deputy Mayor Bailau leading the charge on that with the mayor over the past term, and we've got a lot done. But the acuity of the crisis when it comes to our rental supply, when it comes to rent evictions, those are scenarios where folks who are on the margins, folks who are in precarious positions are often taken advantage of. And so we need to do everything we can to ensure that some of the most vulnerable folks here in the city of Toronto have that stability. And I think that's where these recommendations are coming from. I would push back pretty firmly on the comments from Deputy Mayor Minnan Wong that this is a lightweight report. I think we are working with the tools, with the information that we have available to us to come up with some ideas, to come up with some recommendations, to come up with some requests from the province. And to suggest that this is a newsletter motion, my goodness, like there's a lot of newsletter motions that fly around the council chamber. But the Residential Tenancy Act literally permits and states that these decisions rest with the province. So as a city council, as a creature of the province, we are very much in the position where we need to go to Queen's Park with these questions and have these discussions with the province if we want to address them. It's not something that we can just pull out with the stroke of the pen and solve here in this council chamber. We have to work with the province. We have to work with the governing legislation that oversees these decisions. So, I would push back on that. Where we would share agreement is there has been a huge shortage of new purpose rental built construction here in the city of Toronto for many decades. It's impossible to point to one thing and say this was the reason why that didn't happen. There's been tax policy changes, there's been different market pressures, there has been a condo market and boom that has largely filled the void of purpose-built rental. And yet we have seen some progress over the past year in terms of net new rental units coming onto the market. And that is so important in a city that's facing a 1% rental vacancy in a housing crisis, that we do have a steady, reliable stream of purpose-built rental. That is how we bring stability to the market. That is how we make sure that folks have housing options to move into. Rental is so important, and let's keep in mind that 50% of Torontonians are in rental spaces. And so we need to be thoughtful. I agree with Deputy Mayor Min Wong. We need to be thoughtful about the policy that we're bringing forward with respect to that. And that's why I've moved that motion, asking our Housing Secretariat to look at vacancy control and what the impacts might be on the construction of net new rental. We don't have the information on that in the Ontario context or in the Toronto context, and that's part of the problem. That's why this is not a lightweight report that doesn't have any information. That data is not available to us, and our Housing Secretariat's brought forward a lot of really thoughtful recommendations about where we could pool resources, where we could build branches that collect that information so that we can make better informed decisions. That's the data that we need to have. In the meantime, I would suggest we look at other jurisdictions and their experiences with vacancy controls, like New York City, for example, and what the impact has had there on net new rental construction. Because we need to keep those cranes going up. We need to keep pouring that concrete. We need to continue building new rental buildings here in the city of Toronto, because we just haven't done that for so many years. The last thing I would add is, during this term, I've been very fortunate to work with my colleagues, Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Perks, on our subcommittee protecting affordable rental here in the city of Toronto. And one thing I also want to draw the public's attention to is the recommendations around tying building permits to N13s. N13 is the core of the rent eviction. That is the policy and the notice that you get and you receive when your landlord tells you that they're throwing you out because they're going to do renovations on the property. And too often there are landlords that are trying to defraud tenants. And too often there are landlords that are trying to take care of basic capital upgrades by evicting a tenant and jacking the rent to pay for those capital improvements. And that's not right. So that's actually a really thoughtful recommendation. If we could get that done, I think that would really help us curtail those renovations. And I'm grateful I got to wrap it up here. I'm grateful to our Deputy Mayor, Allow, for driving this, and of course staff who have this in front of us. Hope you support my amendment and this good body
I
of
have a
work coming
question
out.
for you, so if you could wrap it up. Yeah.
Yep, fire away.
Councillor Bradford, there's a question of you on your motion, a question of clarification from Councillor Matlow.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. So there's an A and B to this. A, you rightfully understood and commented on the fact that the province rules the roost on this anyway. So, why do you want this report to come to council? What would you like us to do with it? But B, that information specifically that you're requesting. And then B, aside from some industry-related or right-wing kind of reports, I've never seen any evidence to suggest, what has been suggested in your motion, that it could have that impact. But even if it did, what is material about, even if it had some impact, would you ever want tenants to be left in the vulnerable situation that they're in any buildings? Even if it had some impact on building purpose-built rental, would you want anyone living in those buildings to be left in a situation like I can only imagine you've heard from so many of your own residents who are renters?
Well, thanks for the questions, Councillor. Number one, why would we want this information if the decision rests with the province? Well, the answer to that is I think the City of Toronto ought to be working with both levels of higher order government, whether it's the province or the feds, to address our housing crisis, which is a big challenge that's going to take a whole of government response. So, to Deputy Mayor Min Wong's point, there's a lot of newsletter motions, there's a lot of headline chasing that takes place here at City Hall. What we actually have to do is get the information, get the data to have informed decisions so that we can, those of us who want to go to the table and want to work with people can saddle up there with the information to offer suggestions, to engage in a dialogue about how we could create more effective policy to address the challenges that are facing the City of Toronto. So that's the first part of your question. That's why we need this to come back to council and why we're asking our housing secretary to undertake that work. The second part of your question is, does it matter? Well, I think it does matter because this is a city facing an affordability crisis that is in part driven by supply challenges. The fact that we have less than 1% rental vacancy in the City of Toronto. I don't know how many folks you talk to who are renters. I'm not sure how many folks you talk to who are struggling to get into the rental market, but I talk to a lot of them. They're my friends. There are folks who are trying to move here to the city for jobs, trying to raise a family here, and there's just such a shortage of rental supply. So it would behoove us to understand, why is there a shortage of new purpose-built rental? What are the reasons for that? And part of that, is labor shortages. Part of that is tax policy. Part of that is construction costs. There's a lot of factors. I don't know if you've ever sat down and looked at a pro forma to understand those dynamics, but I think it's a good idea for us to have that information so that when we're creating policy that will influence the construction of net new rental units, we should understand that and do that in a thoughtful way, understanding that we need more purpose-built rental here in the City of Toronto.
Thank you.
Even if it leaves tenants in.
That was it for your
vulnerable
questions.
situation that
Thank
they're in.
you. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, question 3 minutes, clarification of the.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I am just speaking with regard to in the report, I'm asking a question on the vacancy decontrol issues. So would you agree, Councillor, that most of the time we should do the research first and then take a position, and it's, instead of putting the cart before the horse, take a position and then find out if we've taken the right position and do the research? This council usually does the research first. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, I think the way that the recommendation is written in the report is asking the province to consider it. And so we can ask them to consider it. And then as part of that, intergovernmental discussion on addressing, the rental component of the housing crisis, we could come back with more information that would allow us to have a more informed and thoughtful conversation about that. So I'm comfortable with the language as it's written by our housing secretariat, and she's provided commentary both through committee and in other channels that would suggest, look, we don't have all the answers, which is kind of why, the purpose of this motion is to get some more information with that respect. I think it would be a better conversation if we had that information, which is why we're moving the motion.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, due respect, Councillor, it says request the government to amend. It doesn't say think about it. It says we'd like you to do this. It doesn't say.
I think when by
request,
a request, it's a request. We're not directing them because we can't. So
no, but you're not saying,
will consider the request. I mean, we can parse out the language, but I would say it's a request for their consideration. They're going to consider it.
And what your motion does is it makes us take a position, and then we're going to go back and do the research. Do you think that's a good way to do it? Or do you think that a responsible way to do it would be to do the research first and then take a position on it? Isn't that what our constituents want us to do? To be thoughtful before we take a position?
Well, again, my motion, which I think is helpful, and I think you're going to want to support, is actually requesting us to do that work. The recommendations in the report, the staff recommendations, of course, are making that request of the province. So I'm not sure if you're asking me about the recommendations coming in the staff report or if you're asking me about my motion.
Are you concerned that the city hasn't done the necessary research to present something in a completed form to this meeting?
No, I'm not concerned. I think that the report is solid. I think that with the information and the data that we have available, which our housing secretariat has made very clear, like there's a gap in the data. There's a lot of information that is not available to us today, and the report and the recommendations speak to that. And we could do better work, of course, with more data. That's not a problem that's unique to this particular report. And you could say that pretty much with all of the things that come across our desk here at City Hall. More information, more data, better outcomes.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think this might be my last question. If the report,
Okay, thank you. That was your last question. Thank you.
Oh, Madam Chair.
Got a good one there.
The last one was a good one.
Okay, come on. Councillor Holiday to speak.
I was just getting
And
started and
I
getting
want
some
to,
momentum.
I want to remind members of council, we just have a few items left. We want to complete the agenda, please.
Thanks, Madam
Yeah.
Speaker.
Yeah, so maybe what I would suggest, we don't take a lunch and finish the agenda because like we're going. Okay, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Speaker.
To speak.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I'm going to ask that recommendations 5D, that pertains to rent control, and recommendation number 9, which pertains to vacancy control, be separated for a vote. My comments are as follows. You know, we spend hours in this council chamber, and gosh, I don't agree with a lot of it, but we spend the time anyways, talking about how we can create more units, especially on single-family homes, you know, above, below, behind, beside, under, over. And then we turn around as a council and we start meddling in provincial policies by putting out these statements. My gosh, you know, on one hand, council is trying to open up zoning controls and official plan controls to encourage people to build rental units and have small landlords create more units, maybe within their own properties, within their own household, or within the building. And we turn around and we make it harder for them to try to have a successful operation by putting more and more and more controls in it. Like who wants to be a landlord with all these kinds of things going on? I think we should be mindful of the conflicting situation that we're creating here. We're so concerned with the creation of the properties in the built form, and then we turn around and we start to get involved with the economics of it. And, you know, we can do study after study or talk about a lot of things, but the bottom line comes to when you place more controls on the rent, you affect the economics, and I think you change the risk profile for anybody that is trying to become a landlord. And yes, it's a business. Whether you're just renting out your basement, or, you know, your new garden suite behind your house, or if you are a larger business owner or a conglomerate of business owners that have entire buildings, it's all a business. And if it's maybe your basement apartment, there's a lot more layers in there about emotion and concern about your own property and living next to it. But the larger businesses go through this with mathematics, with accountants, with people that understand risk, and they figure out what all this stuff costs. So you got to ask yourself, if you're going to introduce more controls on rent and increase the risk, well, what do you think the business does? They need to calculate what that risk is, and they have to factor all of that into their business decisions. Whether they're going to buy a property, how much they're going to pay for the land, how much they're going to charge for rent, how much they're going to set aside for all of the risks that this introduces. So, you know, I wonder, you know, is the long game that you're going to try to squeeze down the rents and what people pay? The system always equalizes itself, and I think council needs to be really careful about the big picture that results from these type of policy decisions. Be really, really careful. But at the end of the day, we want to encourage people to create rental properties so that there's places for people to go. And instead of that, we turn around and we go after landlords. I don't know. The irony in this place strikes me sometimes. We should focus on what we're good at, and that's understanding the built form and the fabric around the city, and we got to have lots of debates about that. But, you know, I'm frustrated with this report now that now reaches into the decisions that are made at Queen's Park, and we feel we need to take a position on those now, because we want to be everything to everybody. You know, it's what I said the other day, just about trying to focus the debates at council and work on the things that are our job and allow the province to do what's theirs. And, you know, that's the system that we've got before us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll to speak.
It has been wonderful, Madam Speaker,
to have this discussion safe in the knowledge that emanating from these speakers in this chamber, the voice of the landlord has been here throughout. The voice of the landlord is always loud in this chamber. But I happen to think that it is my job to worry about tenants, because we all make a commitment here. When we are elected, we represent every living soul in our wards. And in my ward, most of them are tenants. Mostly on the phone, I hear from homeowners who are a minority in the ward, but we address their needs as well, because they are one of those living souls in the ward. So this is our job. And I think it's time to give our heads a shake. The word renoviction is fast becoming, it started out as a slang term. It's now in a dictionary. It's in the Collins Dictionary. It's slated to be in the Webster Dictionary in the next year or two. Because worldwide, this is happening. And today we're talking about all the types of tenancies so that the voice of the landlord can be covered no matter what type of property he's renting out. But the fact of the matter is, the problem we're in is not a matter of rent controls being evil or vacancy, suppression of vacancy rates, vacancy decontrol, all of that, any of that being a terrible, terrible risk. In fact, the reason we slowed down in having rental properties is we actually built too many cement slab apartment buildings all at one time. I represent in North York, where a huge number of them. The Peanut was an explosion of cement slab apartment buildings. And we built so many of them that for decades, owners of them, families that owned them, simply swapped them and flipped them and roiled and boiled their investments, all the while, all of them making money, all of them getting very, very wealthy. And there were enough of them that you could just churn them through the market to keep the money rolling until at last they were all wholly owned. And just as we thought we got enough housing, the invention of the thing called the condominium came along. And the first piece of legislation that was the job of municipalities is to say to the province, we need to partner together and say, if you want to build a condominium, fine, but you can't take all of our rental stock and convert it to condominium. That was the first time we had to save rental housing because it was about to be obliterated by the conversions. And it's time again to address a phenomenon that is threatening tenancies all over this city. With respect to individual homes, to be fair, a lot of people have gotten into this market as landlords who aren't professional landlords. They're personal homeowners, and the market was so exciting and the rents were getting higher and higher. Your carrying cost could be captured in that rent, and it just kept going higher and higher. That there are probably speculators in this market who are undercapitalized and really can't stay in this market. Because as the rents go down, their carrying costs won't be there. And so we will probably have to be patient and cognizant of them and protect them in some way or another. But ultimately, what does seem to be our job, because the province loves to download on us, is homelessness. So if making sure that there are homes isn't part of that job, I don't know what is. Because if they land us with the people who end up sleeping in parks and shelters and hotels that really should go back to being hotels, then we better take up the task of making sure that there are homes for them to get in. And once they're in them, they should have some protections. So what's before you today is not a finished piece. And I'll wrap this up, Madam Speaker, by saying, please look at the first recommendation before we admonish the Housing Secretariat one more time for this not being a finished piece, because it very much is a framework designed to help us develop a policy. It isn't the policy. There is more work to be done. The recommendation tells you that. And if we're asking questions of the province to help us develop that, consider the province we're asking. Of course, we're throwing in the kitchen sink. We'll be lucky if they say, yeah, we'll do 1/32 of that.
5 seconds, thank you.
Those are my comments, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Lai to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank the Housing Secretariat. I think you're doing a good job here, and the members of the Planning and Housing Committee. I think we're getting on the right track here, and it's very important that we have good policies to make sure that we care about the tenants in the city. I don't know. I haven't spoken to Councillor Holiday. We're on the same track and on the same wavelength, and I would also like to separate vote on the recommendation number 5D and recommendation 9. And it's very important that we create the supply of stock, of rental stock in the city to ease this affordability rental situation. And I also concur with Councillor Holiday by saying that we have to be mindful that we don't create a situation that is conflicting here. And we should actually encourage people to build more housing rental stock. And I know that for a fact that people are not building rental stock is because of the rent control. That's for a fact that there's no money and then it doesn't make sense.
That's not true.
Who is speaking? Speaker? I hope I have the floor, please. Thank you. And so that's why I said very important that recently I actually talked a developer in my ward into building rental instead of condominium, because our city has a open door policy that I've told them that there's some incentive right there. Then you have to have the buy-in to give them incentive, not de-incentive, for them to build all these rental stock. And that's why it's very important. The supply and demand, we have to balance it. And also, I think that it's very important that we have good information, enough information and research before we can take a position, and before we can make a decision on how decision can properly be made. And I really commend the Housing Committee by going forward with asking the provincial government to consider to change some of these and fine-tuning some of these policies. At the end of the day, we need to, update some of these policies and, to make sure that it really works. And I would be supporting the report, except for recommendation 5D and recommendation number 9. Thank you, Speaker. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher to speak.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I just wondering what city we all think we live in and which wards we're representing, because 50% of Torontonians are renters. So that means every 55, it means in every single ward, we have so many renters. And when we set up our committee, the subcommittee for the protection of affordable rental housing, it really was spurred by the fact that people were being rent-evicted. And I think, Councillor Carroll, you said it was an odd word, and now it's becoming in everyday parlance, because a rent-eviction is a really serious matter. We cannot build affordable housing as fast as landlords are rent-evicting people from affordable rents. It's impossible. And to take this discussion, which is about protecting affordable rental units across the city, and turn it into something that somehow we're not building rental because of rent control. I think we're not building rental. We're going to stop building rental because of the cost of building, not because of rent control. As a matter of fact, between the year 2000 and 2001, rents increased in Toronto by 94%. It's a very lucrative thing, rental. The problem is what happens when you have decades old, and I think Councillor Robinson spoke about that, buildings, people being forced out for development, for redevelopment. They've lived there, it's their neighborhood. They've lived there for 30 years, 20 years, they have a stable rent, it's increased over time gradually, and they're being demolished they're gone. The clearances are on. Or you have a building where a landlord buys it as an investment. They want a big return on investment. There's only one way. That's to raise those rents as much as possible. Those are homes. That's where people are living. So this isn't about the rents on new buildings per se. You're building something new, unless you have an agreement with the city for a certain amount of affordable rental, you can charge whatever you want for starting. You can charge $5,000 a month if you'd like for starting. You can charge $3,000 a month for starting. You don't have to charge CMHC. You only have to charge that if you have affordable. So let's drop that straw man about nobody's ever going to make any money with new rental. There's a lot of money in new rental. The problem is established rental, where you're someone who has had a modest rent, you've been there for 20 years, it's your family home up on Cosburn, and all of a sudden, you get a notice saying, we're going to do a renovation in your unit, it's going to be so extensive, we're evicting you. And somehow, that's renovation really isn't that extensive. So one of the things we're trying to get to here is to have some proof that you really need to take a unit away from somebody permanently in order to achieve your repair of a unit. I'm sorry, friends, I've seen so many of them where it's simply not true. And then to have tenants understand that they have rights. They have a right to return to that unit and to have something very proactive from the city, because the province isn't doing that, and we do have obligation, responsibility to renters to let them know you have a right to return, that landlord should be giving you this when they're giving you this notice. And by the way, we're going to check and make sure you really need to evict that person. I have met with tenants every week for a month and a half in East York, where someone said, we need to kick you out. MLS came in and said, this is not, there's no building permit required here. So folks, let's just focus on what we're really doing here today. We are trying to make sure that the clearances of tenants through renovictions, where your $900 a month apartment, you're evicted, and then it's rented out for $2,700 a month, the same place, is controlled. That's every avenue, every way we can possibly do that. That is our job in this city.
Thank you. Councillor Perks to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. Deputy Mayor Min Wong challenged us to be thoughtful and deep and do our research. Challenge accepted. Deputy Mayor Min Wong made the case that if we remove rent control, we cause more construction of rental buildings. And if we impose rent control, we reduce the amount of rental construction. It's not a new argument, it's been around forever. In fact, it's an argument that the province of Ontario took to heart in 1996 when it eliminated rent control. In the following 20 years, from 96 to 2016, a total of 3,400 rental units were constructed, 170 units a year. So did the grand experiment of eliminating rent control cause there to be an increase, a massive increase in rental construction? No, it actually took us into the period of the slowest rental construction in the history of the City of Toronto. So there's the evidence, there's the research that Councillor Min Wong wanted. It shows quite clearly that his thesis is wrong. So if that thesis is wrong, we have to ask ourselves, what are some of the other things that are driving the market, the dynamics about why rental doesn't or does get constructed in the City of Toronto? And I would say there are three things. The first thing was the introduction of the Condominium Act and various amendments to it that happened from the late 70s into the 80s. Effectively, what it did is it said, if you are someone who wants to invest money in real estate construction to make a profit, instead of getting a low return over a long period of time, you can get a big return in a short period of time. And guess what? Condo building boomed and rental construction stopped. The second thing that happened in that period is in the mid-1990s, the federal government took itself out of funding social housing. Paul Martin decided, for his reasons, that the federal government would no longer provide funding to municipalities to build social housing. And guess what happened? Social housing stopped being built. That's rental housing, by the way. The third thing that has happened, and it's a more recent thing, but it is having an interesting effect on the rental market in Toronto, was several years ago, the federal government changed tax laws for real estate income trusts, REITs. Pretty much made it a tax-free investment. And guess what's happening? The money that is getting invested in rental is not getting invested in new construction. It's getting invested in purchasing existing buildings, because you make more money if you're a shareholder in a REIT that owns a rental building than if you are someone who just straight owns a rental building. Condominium Act, the end of the investment in social housing, and the tax giveaway, frankly, to REITs. These are the real reasons rental construction is not happening in the city of Toronto. The data shows it has nothing to do with rent control. So if you want to do the research and think deeply, perhaps read something other than a lobbying memo from the landlord lobby. Maybe, read a textbook that was written for somebody after they graduated high school. If you want to have a serious conversation about how to have an affordable housing market, absolutely, do the research. The research shows that rent control is not the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Buxton Potts to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. Through you, I mostly want to this item as a renter. And as someone who in their early career moved 10 times in 9 years because I was rent evicted, because owners said that they wanted to move back in because the house was sold, this cost me thousands, like tens of thousands of dollars at a time when I was financially insecure, when I was struggling with substance use and mental health challenges. I'm still trying to get out of that debt, and I am very grateful for this new position because it's helping with that significantly. And I am so privileged that I got a unit in a co-op so that my housing was stabilized and I could afford to get my life back together. And I want to speak a little bit about the co-op that I live in, because when I was 4, I moved into a derelict rental building in East York, and we had 3 property management companies take over the building in the first 5 years that we lived there. And they were neglectful. The elevators didn't work. There was a pool that was infested in the basement. And my mom and stepdad at the time organized our neighbors. We got together with our local city councilor, MP, and MPP, and we organized ourselves, and we had the last provincially funded co-op before My Care Has Killed the program built here. I grew up in this building, and so when I was 18, I was able to put my name down on the waiting list as a member of the co-op. It still took me 10 years to get a unit in this building, but I had that luxury. When we became a co-op, we got a federal grant to renovate our entire building. There are 111 units here. Nobody left. They completely repaired the building. They did the outside, the hallways, each unit, the elevators. They completely refurbished this building and nobody was evicted. It is possible to do. The other piece that I want to speak to is actually, I think, a comment that Deputy Mayor Holliday made about if we are creating policies that protect renters, that make it possible for us to stay in our homes, but by doing that, we make the risks of providing units for landlords too extreme for them to take on, maybe we need to start thinking about what it means for individual landlords to be the backbone of our rental housing market. And I think it supports what Executive Director Abby Bond said, that we need to work on solving the financialization of housing. And maybe individual homeowners shouldn't be in the business of providing a human right, that is shelter. When we encourage this kind of commodified housing, the only way it's a safe investment is at the expense of renters, which ultimately costs the city and our taxpayers when we have to pick up the slack when those people get evicted and we provide expensive, inefficient shelter housing. We need to build more housing to help house people, and we need to equally protect people to stay in the housing they have. Those are two separate planks of this housing crisis that we need to address. And I think asking the province of Ontario for that help is completely appropriate, it's thoughtful, and it's supporting 55% of the residents of this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson to speak.
I'll try to be brief. In fact, I will be brief because a lot of good points have been made. And so I would just like to say that during the questions, I went a bit broader, but now I would just like to spend a minute talking a little bit about Thorncliffe Park. And these issues are prevalent there. In fact, just weeks ago, there was a organized lobby against this type of thing happening in a couple of the buildings there. They had a protest, a little petition, and they got quite a few people out, but the media didn't come out for this issue. They're feeling very challenged in that area with this type of activity happening by the landlords, forgetting just the regular maintenance. The elevators rarely work. We're constantly receiving emails trying to address that. The stairwells are in a condition I wouldn't want to describe in a public session. And it's a nonstop challenge for tenants in Thorncliffe Park. We hear from them regularly. And when we have public meetings and gatherings, it's the top issue in that neighborhood. But this issue is, I'm happy it's being addressed by city staff. I think it's important. I know this will be welcome news in Thorncliffe Park by the residents there, not just because of the current conditions, but also when renovations take place. And, you know, examples where the foyer gets a little makeover and suddenly, shoom, up goes the price tag. And people are in disbelief at the little amount of activity that happens and the resulting impact on their income. So I think it's very important we do this work, and I'll be watching closely as we do it, and certainly supporting Thorncliffe Park, continuing to support the residents of Thorncliffe Park. But I also, during my questions, highlighted what's happening at Yonge and Eglinton. A lot of seniors, people with accessibility issues in those neighborhoods that are being turfed out. It's heartbreaking. I've said it now that 3 times because there's no better word to describe being at these meetings where people are losing their homes. And you know, they've grown up there and they've made all their connections there. That's where their grocery store is. That's where their eye doctor is. And you know, some of the state of the buildings at Yonge and Eglinton surprisingly are a bit concerning. I'm happy to walk you through some of those buildings, as I would be happy to in Thorncliffe Park. But this broader issue should be tracked by city staff. It needs to be tracked. And you know, we heard Councillor Carroll state, you know, the voice of the landlord is clear at this meeting, loud and clear. I would also say the voice of developers have been loud and clear at this meeting throughout these 4 days. And so developers are ripping down these buildings that are usually mid-rise and putting up skyscrapers in the Yonge Eglinton area, and these people are losing their homes. So this is quite an array of issues. that we're trying to address here. It's not easy to facilitate, but I'm glad to see that there's steps happening in the right direction. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. Councillor Layton to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would just say I don't think much needs to be said about some of the arguments that were made by the Deputy Mayor and others. Rather significantly countered by Councillor Perks, who I think made a very good case for greater regulation of the industry to ensure that we, in fact, as we build, we're building affordable rental, and that the deregulation of rent or in the absence of rent control, that didn't actually result in more being built. What I want to focus on is just a brief story about rent eviction. Who lived in a building. My sound's not working apparently.
Yeah, your audio's not working well.
Is it any better now?
Little better.
A little better. Well, just really quickly, 2017, an eight-unit building on College Street was at 795 College. It was well documented in the media. One by one, tenants were being forced out by a new landlord, and they knew they were being rent evicted for all the nonsensical reasons that people get rent evicted or landlords find excuses. It's a family member. Oh no, sorry, it's a renovation. Oh no, sorry, it's this. The tenants stayed and fought. They were artists, had great rents, beautiful units, and they fought all they could. But slowly, one by one, they were forced out by the landlord-tenant board. But they were guaranteed the right of return. You know how many live there now? 0, because none of them were offered the right to return. What happened was they saw their units one by one get renovated and one by one show up on Kijiji or another rental site at twice the rent. And that shows two problems for me. One is the door is wide open for rent evictions and we need to shut it, which this report helps do. But second is the rents when the units become vacant as much as double or can double or more. That's a huge loss for our city and contributing to this. And for the reasons laid out by a couple of the speakers, this is because the housing market has become so commoditized. And REITs and others are just trying to capitalize on that as much as they possibly can. And it's at the expense of of everyone in the city who is struggling to pay rent now. And I think that and I should say, there was fines levied against the landlord at 795 College, but nothing could be done. Nothing could be done to get those people back, to guarantee those tenants' rights. We need to do something about that. I think that this report does move that forward and at least try to get us to push the province in that direction. But we also need to focus on the long-term affordability, that if we don't sort of stop this commodification of housing where we are able to, and that's through the province, then it will only continue and the rents will only continue to rise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailão to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A lot has been said, and I'm going to try to be brief. I want to thank the subcommittee that we had at Planning and Housing with our chair, Councillor Fletcher, and members, Councillor Perks and Councillor Bradford, to doing a lot of work on this issue, and in particularly the rent evictions issue, which I am sure most of you have had to deal or hear about some of these issues in your own wards. Madam Speaker, I really appreciated this focus on building more rental. The mayor passed a motion on another item to actually set up a table with our housing secretariat and planning and CFO as well to deal with this issue on how to build more rental and to work with our provincial and federal government. And I do think this is a really important conversation that needs to happen, and the three levels of governments need to be involved. But this report is obviously in response to a specific issue and as part of our housing plan. And as you put a housing plan together, you have key goals. And I think that what our housing secretariat tried to do in here, it was actually, it's balancing. And it's a balancing act to make sure that, yes, we continue to have rental built in this city. We recognize how important it is to build rental. We're not doing enough. I've talked about this at this council meeting already. We used to have 40% of the units built in this city as purpose-built rental. We're now, last year was 15%, and we know that this year is going to be less. So there is a lot of work that needs to happen in there. But there's also some other key issues and goals, which is maintaining people housed, maintaining the state of good repair of the existing rental stock, which is extremely important. Ensure that people have rental as a real option, that they feel that it is an option for their lifestyle, for that they have security of tenure, and obviously continue to build more purpose-built rental. And let me tell you that when we talk about these units, we're specifically dealing with rent-evictions. A lot of this is some of the most affordable stock that we have in the city of Toronto. And if you talk with a lot of people that are in the purpose-built rental business, they very often say, you know, we need to build purpose-built rental, any kind of purpose-built rental, because eventually these units will become more affordable. We had it presented not too long ago. I think it was at Executive that, you know, the Apartment Association showed us that some of the most affordable stock that we have today were the luxury rentals of 30 and 40 years ago. So we need to protect that. And that's what this report tries to do. It's to ensure that that stock is going to be available and in a state of good repair at an affordable, a moderate rate for the people of Toronto. That is really important stock that we have in the city. And like it was said, and Councillor Layton described one specific situation with the rent-eviction. I was familiar with that case already. It's heartbreaking to have somebody misled and having their life turned upside down, and having to end up at landlord and tenant boards because of these issues, because the landlord is not being truthful with them, and the reality is not a lot of times that they don't really need to move out to have whatever done. They just want to have the rent increased. And so all we really want to do is create a framework to support those people and try to protect those units, which are some of the most affordable stock that we have in the city, like I said, while maintaining a balance and recognizing, there's no question about it, that we need to do more, and we need to work with the other orders of government to have more purpose-built rental built in this city as well. But at the same time, we can't be building on one side and losing on the other some of the most affordable rental unit stock that we have in our city. We need to tackle both ends.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the speakers. Put the motions on the screen. By Councillor Bradford. On favor? Recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
In favor?
Counselor Peruzza, your vote, please. Oh,
In favor? In favor?
thank you. Motion 1 carries. The vote is 21-3.
Okay, next motion. By Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. Recorded vote.
Motion 2 does not carry. The vote is 4-20.
Okay, next motion. Okay, so part 9. Councillor Holiday has asked for a separate vote on part 9. Recorded vote. Part 9.
Counselor Peruzza, please. Part 9 of the item carries. The vote is 21-3.
Item is amended.
Point of order.
Pardon?
Point of order, please.
Point of order?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I did also request 5D to be voted on separately.
Yeah, we'll explain it because we already voted on it. You voted no.
Part 5D was recommended to be deleted in motion 2, so council already voted on part 5D.
Okay, item is amended. Item is amended. All in favor? Recorded vote. If we can try not to be on the phone during the council meetings, it would be greatly appreciated.
Councillor Carroll, your vote, please. The balance of the item as amended carries. The vote is 23 to 1.
I don't answer it. I don't answer it. Yeah, I know it's my favorite song. Okay, members, we have 12 items still left. Okay, so if we can maybe try to get this completed as soon as possible. Okay, so our next item is PH 3520, which is local priority rules for rent geared to income housing. Do we have any questions on this item? Councillor Bailao, any questions? No? Anybody? No? Okay, do we have any speakers? Councillor Bailao?
I have a motion, and just to emphasize the priority for victims of domestic violence. This is actually legislated by the province, but some people in the sector felt like we were contradicting ourselves, and so I just worked with staff on this motion just to make sure that we're clear that we are following provincial legislation, and it's very much part of our priority list.
Good. Thank you.
Perfect.
Councillor Holliday, you want to speak?
I do, Madam Speaker. I have a motion. It's a rather brief one, if I could ask the clerks to show it. I know there's a lot of words on the motion, but effectively what it does is it says that we will not have a random draw system. Changes the proportion that was amended at the committee from 25% to 0. And wanted to talk a little bit about this. Some members might remember the hat that I used for inclusionary zoning. We can't take a rabbit out of it, but I actually really want to thank staff for this report, because part of it is in response to an audit, and it talked about people's confidence in how units are allocated. We've talked about that around council before, about making sure that affordable housing gets out to members in the community and having a sensible and transparent and well understood way about how those are matched with people that need them. And ultimately it gets people the help that they need faster. But there's something in here that has really troubled me, and it's fundamental. And there's a piece in the report that says we're going to continue to support a system which holds a random draw. So can you imagine, you put people's names in a hat about who's going to be allowed to live in the 416, and you pick their name out. I know they're qualified on a list, but I thought the concept was those most in need got the resource first. So I have talked to the clerks about it. I really want to support a lot of the good work in this report. So I have to move this motion to show that I just cannot understand how we can have a city that relies on the luck of a draw as to whether or not you get the privilege to live in the 416. I don't think I'm the only one that thinks this. If you look on page 8 of the report, you'll find that in the consultation process, the staff even put it into the report that people didn't feel that this was the right way to proceed, that it wasn't transparent, it didn't exude confidence in the system. I just don't think that we should leave things to chance. It's like some future world or dystopian movie that, whether, you play often, play big, and, maybe your name will get picked out of the hat and your life will change. I just think we can do better. And, there's a system proposed in this report that can do better. So fundamentally, I just can't support the concept that we would take resources, essentially public resources, and give them away through a draw. There is a better way to do it. It's in that report. Councillor Fletcher, if I can just finish. I just want people to feel confident in the system, and we've all got those calls about that. So I hope you support my motion. I just think that there's a better way to do things, and I can make this hat available as we approve projects that have affordable housing in them. Maybe make the council decision a little more exciting. We can put the local names in the hat and draw them out as part of the approval. I don't know. I mean, it's here for you if you need it, but I hope you understand that this is just fundamentally something that troubles me about this system. Thank you.
Could you
Thank
move out
you.
of the way, please? Hi.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate very much what Councillor Holliday has said, because I felt like that when I read it myself. But I've come to understand one of the issues, and that's why this was amended at committee, Councillor. It was amended from 50-50 to 75-25 with the review that it will at some point become the wait list. And I accepted that simply because there is no wait list at the moment. So essentially, in order to make sure that we get the wait list, get things moving, it's kind of like a pump. And I know you've got to prime that pump with some water. You can't just start pumping and get the water out. So this is the compromise to make sure that units are not sitting empty, but that shortly after these begin, that we will be able to have a big enough wait list that people can move in promptly when the units are ready. The other thing is that once they change over, of course, that will be done through the wait list. That will not be done through a draw. So I think we've minimized the piece of the draw as much as we can here in order not to have a system where we have a bottleneck with 15 new units and nobody there to move into them. That's why I can't support your motion. I believe in what you're saying. I want to get to there. I'm assuming we'll get to that within a couple of years. And that is why I amended that from 50-50 to 75 with the direction that eventually, shortly, there will be a wait list. Because I agree with you about the fairness of waiting. We know how many people are waiting for RGI. We will have a wait list for affordable housing. If you're waiting for 5 years and somebody just walks in and puts their name in and all of a sudden now they have a unit, I don't believe in that either, Councillor. So this is how I think we should manage this at this juncture, because we don't want to leave units open. And that's why I can't support your motion, but I agree with your motion. How's that?
Thank you. Councillor Carroll to speak.
Yes, very briefly, Madam Speaker, I have to speak to the motion that's been moved because I come at it from the same perspective. I hate the lottery. I hear about it all the time from residents, but I hear about it most at my Thanksgiving table because my own daughter, who easily qualifies for this as a single mom of a certain income, has entered dozens of lotteries and hates them. That being said, it is true that staff did survey consultations. I attended them, and we have to acknowledge that a certain segment of a sizable portion said they think the lottery is fair. We can't just ignore that. Having asked, we have to accept that they said that. But we also know that there is this rising dissatisfaction of, wait a second, I'll never get one this way. I am supportive of the ratio that has been chosen to have some by a waiting list and some by lottery, because the lottery system is set up. We know that it is doing something. It is putting people in. Starting with the waiting list in this portion allows us to make sure that we get it right, something we don't always do, but we're gonna spend this time getting it right. But it also takes care of a particular part that I'm particularly concerned with, and that is this. In the affordable rental that we get in certain percentages inside market buildings, 5% here, 10% there, sometimes we're lucky we get 100 in a building, but we're very focused on who moves into them first. What concerns me is that we're actually doing our job quite well. We're creating thousands and thousands of these units, and down the line we will have that other problem, the problem of now the affordable tenant moves out and there's one unit, and where does that go? without this waiting list in some portion, without getting started on the waiting list right now, what we know is that where that probably goes is the rental agent picks up the phone and calls a relative and puts them in that unit. Because we don't have that system set up yet. The waiting list and beginning to have a proper vetting system and perhaps growing its proportion of how we do this over time helps us with that problem, that we will have created thousands of units to last for 25 years, some applications 99 years or in perpetuity. And in those cases, getting this waiting list right means that later on down the line, we're going to have a way to make sure that should 2 or 3 people move out, we have a very good system that will help us put people in those units. The property manager will have a place to call and say, one of my affordable units is coming due, and fairly, and using that list, will be able to place in those individual situations. So I'm really happy with the way we're starting. I'm really grateful to staff, because when I had concerns about the lottery survey results, they were very responsive in coming to my office and walking through it and reworking it and coming back with what we have here. So I urge councillors not to support the motion, but to actually allow staff to proceed in the way that they are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion by Councillor Holliday. Sorry, Councillor Bylaw's motion. On favor? Carried. Councillor Holliday's motion? Recorded.
Center, but and the affordable. But when we go forward, we also envision a seniors village where there's affordable seniors housing, support services, wraparound services that will be built in the years to come. I think that this is a good deal for Downsview. I think it sets a good precedent and a benchmark for when Bombardier leaves and those lands become vacant, and those lands will be developed as well. I want to assure the residents of Downsview that no part of the Downsview Park is being built on. These lands that are on the William Baker, which are on the north side of Shepherd Avenue, were never part of the envisioned park from the 1990s, 1980s, and that the 200 or plus acres, plus the 89 acres in the commons, park commons, are untouched by this development. As a matter of fact, when this development is fully built out, we'll have gained parkland, more space for the City of Toronto. So with that, I'd just like to thank all the people who are involved. I would be amiss if I didn't thank Canada Lands for their cooperation on this, including James Cox and Bob Hulbert, who wanted to make this deal good not only for the federal government and the City of Toronto, but the good people of Downsview. So with that, I think we can watch this in the years to come as an example of all levels of government coming together and making development work, making for a stronger, healthier, complete community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have a question for you, Councillor Pruitz. 3 minutes. Claire. Oh, you want to speak? Okay, Councillor Pruitz to speak.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Speaker, I love Councillor Pasternak. I work well with him on all kinds of stuff. We have abutting wards, but I just want to go back to something he said earlier, where there was an acrimonious relationship there at Downsview. I don't know about that, and there may have been in some other parts of the lands, but William Baker was part of the Downsview lands that was part of my ward. And I can tell you that I never really had any dealings with the local residents on developments in William Baker, because William Baker at that time was not being developed. What I did do with William Baker that did cause a little angst with folks and ruffle the Canada Lands feathers. So Canada Lands, as you all remember, around William Baker, that was the officers' housing. So they had these nice homes in there, scattered throughout this wood lot with really, really big trees. And Canada Lands at some point said, you know what, we want to demolish these things because, you know, they're kind of like falling down, they're a bit of a hazard, and we would just want to take them out. But around the William Baker neighborhood, Canada Lands had this massive concrete wall that made it very difficult and completely inaccessible by the local community. While they had this beautiful woodlot in there, this mature forest, which I'm thankful that Councillor Pasternak has found the wherewithal to preserve, and Canada Lands has found the wherewithal to preserve in future development applications. But there was this massive concrete wall around this site, and what I did do is Canada Lands wanted to demolish the homes, but many of you will know that we have this very interesting power at City Council. We can actually withhold the demolition permit. It's one of the only things that we can actually do without a whole lot of frou-frou. So you say, you want a demolition permit? No, you can't have it. And there's nothing that you can do about it. No Ontario Municipal Board, no LRT, no this, no that. You can actually withhold a demolition permit. So they had to come in and say, okay, like, what's up? I said, fine, we'll take down the houses. Then you restore the houses, you restore a park into that beautiful park setting, but you take down this concrete wall in and around this neighborhood. Reluctantly, because they said, oh, but then we're going to have people in there. Yeah, we're going to put in some trails and we're going to do some nice stuff. So reluctantly, they did that. You know who the biggest advocates and whose biggest marketing thing is today? Downsview Lands. You know what they come in and say? We got this beautiful William Baker. It's a park for people. We got a trail through it. You can ride your bike. You can do all kinds of stuff. There's a plaque now there. There's a plaque there. The Peruzza Pasternak Park, sure. I'm happy with that. In that order, by the way, for this one. So they did do it. They did it reluctantly, but they're the biggest advocates of it now. So they were dragged into that process where they had to create this park that people have been using now for the last 10, 15 years. I remember North York Council at the time when I withheld that permit. I remember, in fact, people challenging that, said, "Oh, you can't do that. No. Remember, no, you can't do that." I said, "Yeah, we can," and we did, and it turned into a beautiful park. And Canada Lands is sort of the biggest advocate of it. So I'm really, really glad that it's kind of like it's moving forward, and I'm glad that Councillor Pasternak has developed a different working relationship with the local neighborhood on this issue, and I continue to work with him as the abutting neighbor representing the community right across the street from this site. So I still hold it near and dear, and from time to time, Madam Speaker, I go and I ride my bike there just to enjoy that forest, because it's absolutely beautiful, and would encourage everybody else here to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the motion by Councillor Pasternak, on favor, recorded vote.
Well, Speaker, every once in a while you get to tell a little story, right?
Pardon?
Members of council, if you are voting, could you please turn on your video cameras? Councillor Layton, are you present and voting?
Yes, my apologies. I voted on CMP, but I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll, can we get your vote, please? And Councillor Perruzza, can we get your vote, please?
In the affirmative.
The motion by Councillor Pasternak carries.
Item is amended, on favor, carried. Yeah. Okay, so members, we just have members' motions left. Now, the first member's motion is MM 4720, which the mayor has an interest on. So I was going to suggest that we do that at the end, and let's go through the other members' motions, so this way, and then the mayor can come in at the end, rather than have to come back and forth. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So our next member's motion is MM 4742. Councillor Carroll, you held it down, 2 Champagne Drive.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have some questions of staff on the instructions in the motion. So I'm wondering if you could, the instructions, this is a development that council already took a position on and gave you instructions. I'm wondering if you could comment on, this is now giving you instructions to not only defend it, but hire outside people to defend it?
Yes, that is correct. Through you, Madam Speaker, Council has already given me instructions to attend the tribunal in support.
In support?
So this would be in addition to that.
So when you're asked to attend the hearing in support of something, how do you support it? Do you use city staff, city experts?
In this situation, the applicant would have their own lawyer and their own witnesses. We would not in the normal course retain expert witnesses ourselves. We would cross-examine.
So you're in support, they're in support, they're gonna bring some folks. Is it unusual then for us to be asking you to spend city funds to hire outside people? Sounds like a happy family's hearing.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that this would be without precedent.
It's without precedent. And when we're figuring out what the budget is for supporting our own staff going to the OLT, do we make those projections on the basis of having to hire outside experts when we're in support, the applicant's in support, everyone's already happy? Do we anticipate spending that money on outside help?
No, we do not.
Okay. Those are my questions. I'll speak to it, Madam Speaker.
Councillor Carroll to speak. Councillor Perruzza, questions?
Unprecedented, but this is also a bit of an unprecedented situation. So City Council took a position on this application that our staff did not recommend, correct?
Madam Speaker, if the questions are going to go into more detail, I would strongly recommend that City Council recess to an in-camera session.
I think we should do that. Because, no, I understand what you want to do, but I think we should, because it's a bit of an unusual situation, I would agree, but you created a picture that's not.
Pasternak, being that this is your motion. Pardon? No, I know, but did you did you want to go on camera? I mean, that was the question that Councilor Prutz is asking. So you're the
You know what,
counselor.
you know what, Speaker, no, that would delay everything, forget it, let's go. Let's-
Okay, so, all right. So Councilor Pasternak, questions?
So this this decision made by council was to protect a crucial medical facility and allow them to provide medical services that were lost when the Branson Urgent Care Center closed. Their biggest tenant is North York General Hospital. Without these services, which are 99% paid by OHIP, would you describe that as something that is extraordinary and unusual rather than the motion being the precedent? It's preserving a medical facility is the precedent.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I cannot comment on council's policy decision or the reasons for it. This is employment lands, however.
So I'm reading the motion here. Are we telling you to hire consultants, or we're authorizing you to hire consultants?
Authorize and direct. It says authorize and direct.
Speaker, I think we should go into camera. I think that this is a little more complex than.
Does
than
not say
simply what's
direct.
being prepared. It is.
Word direct.
It is, Shelley. It is, Shelley.
Madam
Pasternak has
Speaker,
the floor.
It would be out of the ordinary for my office to hire external consultants in this situation.
But with staff writing a negative report originally against it, and then council.
Madam Speaker, if the questions are going to veer into confidential matters, I would strongly recommend that council recess to an in-camera session.
All right, I'll speak to the matter.
Okay, but so what are we doing? Do we need to go on camera?
Saying no, he just wants to speak to it.
Want to go on camera?
Pardon? Well, Councilor Peruz is asking. So Councilor Pasternak, you're the counselor. Do you want to go on camera? But it's up to Councilor Pasternak. It's his ward. Councilor Pasternak.
No, I'm going to speak to the matter and in public, and any counselor can request to go in private. If Councilor Perusa feels that's what we have to do here, we can do it. I don't think that's going to change too many votes, but it's his prerogative.
No, it's not necessary.
I'd like to speak, Madam Speaker.
Okay, but if we're going in camera, then you speak after we go in.
No, we're not going in camera. We
just want to speak.
I'd just like to
Two
speak to the
speakers.
item.
Two speakers right here.
I'd like to speak to the item, and then we vote.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Pasternak, speak to the item.
I think I'm first on the list.
Okay, Councilor Carroll.
Sorry, it just went off.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Madam Speaker, it's very simple. It's not about the item for me, it's about the instruction. That's all. We're setting a precedent here that, as the city solicitor has already outlined, is a precedent-setting thing and largely unnecessary. And the reason is this. The rule is council is supreme. Council is supreme. That is the bedrock of everything we do. It goes to our heads often as not, but that's the case. And so for all of the public service, once we've taken a position, they implement it, they defend it. That's what they do. That's why we pay them the big bucks, which we'll discuss in a later item. But that being the case, doesn't matter anything that came before. You made a decision, and every day we send people up the street to the OLT, and they defend whatever you said. And in this case, they're going to defend what you said, and the applicant's going to defend what you said, and everything they said. They're actually, as a result of your decision, practically going up the hill arm in arm to both say, we're ready to go with this. And in that case, we use our in-house staff. We don't need to spend the bucks to bring in the outside. The applicant will bring in the outside just in case the OLT should have some concerns, but the city staff defend your position, which means they don't have those concerns now. Their job is to go and defend your position every time they walk into that room. So if we're opening the door today to when they're going there to defend our position, and our position is on the record and it's the same as the applicants, but we're still going to hire a bunch of outside help, then you better be ready to open up our budget wallet, because you're, as the city solicitor has indicated, you're precedent setting today, and this is going to get expensive. That's my only concern. You'll notice that I was able to make my remarks without talking about the item, what's in it, who voted for it. That's not the concern here. The concern is this simple instruction. It is precedent setting, it is expensive. I'm going to be voting against it. I'm going to be asking for a recorded vote. And if you want to send a message to staff that the practices that we currently use, which is that council is supreme, and when you go up the hill to OLT, you defend us, if you want that to continue, then you should join me in voting against this motion.
Councillor Pasternak to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think if Councillor Carroll knew what I knew, she would not be recommending people vote against this. This is not telling staff to hire expensive consultants. If you read the motion, we're authorizing the city solicitor to retain outside consultants as required. Now, this is a vital medical facility, and council approved overnight stays to save lives. The biggest tenant in there is a North York General Hospital to do surgeries, life-saving treatments, life-saving surgeries. This was the de facto replacement for the Branson Urgent Care Center that was shut down years ago, which has created enormous harm in North York. This is a 99% OHIP covered medical facility that attracts 1,000 people a day to come there for special treatments. The overnight capability was crucial so that people could recover from minor procedures. And it was not impeding in any way with the employment land surrounding it. And that's what triggered this. Sure, there might be a cost to hire consultants to go to a hearing, but what is the cost of not doing it? What is the cost of having Big Oil shut down this medical facility? What is the price then? How do you measure that? This is giving staff the authority to make prudent decisions to save this medical facility. And we do that all the time. We give directions to staff all the time. That is our job. That's where policy is made, on the council floor, giving directions to staff. And that's all we're doing here. The cost for consultants for a hearing like this will be minimal in relation to the cost, the price we would pay if Big Oil wins this. So I'm simply asking you to give city staff that option. Sure, it would be my preference for them to hire people, expert witnesses, to make sure that the tribunal understood how important this was to the city of Toronto and to the local community. We spend money on a lot of things, but saving lives and protecting people and healthcare is an investment worthwhile. And I urge you to support the motion, and let's protect healthcare in North York.
Councillor Perks to speak.
I don't want to get too much into the substance of this, but there are a couple of facts that need to be clearly articulated. The position that the city solicitor is going to be representing at this hearing is based on a motion moved by Councillor Pasternak. He's already got representation for the position that he wants the City of Toronto to take. Further, given that the applicant agrees, the applicant has all of their experts. They have their land use planner, they have their transportation planner, they have their lawyer. Councillor Pasternak moved a motion saying, support what the applicant wants. The applicant has all the experts. It is bizarre to me that we would actually say, you know what? not only are we going to endorse the applicant's position, but we're going to hire our own experts to duplicate their testimony. It is like, there's a reason why this is unprecedented. Can you imagine if all of a sudden members of this council felt that if there was a development they wanted to support, whether staff supported it or not, and said, we're going to actually hire a whole team to duplicate the experts' witness list. We're going to pay them to write up a will say document and any supporting stuff that to hand their document book in. We'll pay them for all that work. We'll pay them to attend. And what will they be doing? They will be repeating what the applicant's witnesses say. It's bananas.
Thank you. Let's put the motion on the screen, recorded vote.
I'd like to speak, please.
Councillor Pruitt to
Very
speak.
briefly. Yeah, the speaker. So there's nothing unusual about this when you look at what is being suggested. We often take decisions as a council, and then if those decisions are appealed, we send our staff, our lawyers, we give direction. We send our staff, our lawyers, our planners, and all of the other folks to defend city council's position. That's what we do every time. You're right. We moved the motion when this matter came before council, and council made that decision overwhelmingly. So we moved the motion. Problem was that the motion that got moved didn't direct the staff, directed our solicitor, but with our staff to attend a decision made by this council, which was not supported by our staff. The position was not supported. So our solicitor doesn't go to the direction that was given was go and defend this decision, basically on your own, without any expertise in tow. What this does is it goes back and clears that up in saying if we're sending our solicitor, then we need to send the appropriate staff, the appropriate people in support of council's decision. That's all that Councillor Pasternak is doing and saying. So there's nothing untoward in that. What's a bit unusual is how this particular decision is under appeal. So if people look at that, they'll come to understand that there's nothing from my perspective untoward here. So I think Councillor Pasternak is absolutely 100% supportable, and what his motion in effect does is gives our solicitor the tools to be able to defend council's decision before the OLT. Thank you.
Okay, now we have another speaker, Councillor Fillion.
I will be brief just to say this is not how things are normally done. This is totally outside of how things are normally done and very inappropriate in my view.
The motion on the screen, recorded vote. On the member's motion, recorded vote.
Members participating remotely, please remember to turn your cameras on during voting. Thank you. Councillor Ainsley, can you give us just a verbal yes that you're present? Councillor Perruzza, your vote, please.
In the affirmative?
The affirmative, thank you. Councillor Thompson, your vote, please.
Negative, yes.
Thank you. And one last call for Councillor Ainsley to indicate his presence in the virtual chamber, either by video or verbally. Madam Speaker, I'm not able to confirm Councillor Ainsley's presence in the virtual chamber, so we are going to remove his vote. The item does not carry. The vote is 4-13.
Our next item, MM 4745, continuing progress on the road to Vision Zero. Councillor Holliday, you held the item down. Do you have questions?
I do not have questions, Madam Speaker, but I wish to speak to it.
Okay, does anybody else have questions? Okay, Councillor Holliday to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I understand the importance of the motion and the importance of Vision Zero and the importance of road safety in the city of Toronto. But I do have concerns about the timing of this proposal coming forward. The opening statement in number 1 is to take a closer look at the creation of community safety zones, and that's really pursuant to add automated speed enforcement into those areas. And so I worry because council made a plan, and our plan was to put automated speed enforcement in front of the 1,000 schools that we've got in the city. And we are about this far into that process because we've got 2 cameras and soon to be 3 cameras per ward. But it's going to take a very long time to work through those schools. So I think the proposal before us is premature. I think we should get job number 1 done first, which is to address the situations in front of the schools before we even think of opening a public conversation about here, there, and everywhere where we can add community safety zones and ultimately put a camera in. And for that reason, Madam Speaker, I'm going to ask that you separate items 1 and 2 from item number 3, which I don't have any issue supporting. But I think council should be very careful in how we stretch our programs thin to make sure that they remain effective. And I voted for it, and I still support the Vision Zero program of putting automated speed enforcement in front of schools. And I think that's largely supported by the public. And deviating from that process, especially on members' motion at the end of the council meeting, I think is concerning, and I think we should be thinking very carefully before taking those next steps. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Holliday has asked that we separate, and we have a recorded vote, so if we can put that on the screen. Yeah, because Councillor Holliday has asked for a separate vote. Councillor Holliday?
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, if I may have a separated vote on items 1 and 2, they may be considered together.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on item 1 and 2, recorded vote.
Counselor Thompson, can we get your vote, please? This
Yes.
is item 4745.
Yeah, I'm in the affirmative.
Sorry, it's parts 1 and 2 specifically.
Yeah, thanks.
And Counselor Pertza, please.
In favor?
Parts 1 and 2 carry. The vote is 17-1.
Him on favor, carry. Okay, our next item is MM 4777. Next steps in building the Shepherd West Subway. Counselor Perks, you held the item down. Do you have questions?
No, I don't. I just can't vote for this, so I want a recorded vote.
You want a recorded vote?
Yeah.
Recorded vote. Okay, recorded vote. Yes, on the item. Yeah, we're voting on. Recorded vote was asked. Counselor Perks asked for a recorded vote.
Counselor Thompson, may I have your vote, please?
In the affirmative.
Thank you. And Counselor Pertza, your vote, please.
In the affirmative.
Thank you. The item carries. The vote is 12-7.
Okay, thank you. Now, our last member's motion is MM 4720. So the mayor has an interest in it, so we're going to do that. And then we have one more item after that, and then the agenda is completed. So if anybody has questions of staff, they can put the name on the list. And Councillor Carroll, if you can come, because I have.
You want to be,
Okay, so councillors, we're proceeding to the motion, and Councillor Matlow has some questions. Councillor Matlow.
Madam Speaker. Through to staff, while the Rogers outage impacted so many millions of people and businesses across the country, in Toronto in particular, I understand that there were services that were directly impacted including, for example, and I still need to understand why, but I understand that there's a protocol with regard to needing access to a cell phone and waiting pools. I can only infer a safety measure, but can somebody maybe from Parks speak to that protocol and were waiting pools closed due to that fact?
So, Councillor Matlow, did you say could someone from Parks? Mr. Etta is here to answer your questions on this item. Did
Well,
you?
I was trying to make it easy on Mr. Etta. If Etta knows the answer, if Mr. Etta knows the answer to that particular question, of course he can respond.
The difficulty may be with 2 items left on the agenda, I don't think we're going to be able to access someone from Parks, but I'm pretty sure Mr. Etta could probably answer it from his end.
Well,
And then we'll see if you need more information.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think we all know that that's true, so I don't need to really pursue that more. Perhaps Mr. Etta can, in your own voice, in your own words, without me leading you, perhaps if you could maybe tell us sort of, in general, the kind of impact that you believe it had on our city services.
Yes, through the chair, thank you very much, Councillor Matlow. There are a number of city services that were affected in long-term care, some of the areas within corporate security and certain other divisions. And part of it is that the telecommunications aspect, specifically in this case, Rogers, provides that linkage for that telecommunications to these services. So when it's affected, it affects areas within PSNR, it affects those areas within the business line. So overall in the city, there was a significant impact with this outage, and other businesses across the country suffered.
And it is true that we are laying out a fiber optic network of our own, are we not? To deal with traffic signal services and stuff like that.
Yeah, through the chair, part of the report that council is aware in terms of what we brought as Connect TO was recognizing that these connections or telecommunications are an essential service, and the city requiring an ability to interconnect our fiber to support these needs. And I think that this is just demonstrate that in concert with working with the private sector. So I think the timing of this happening and the report that we brought to council a few cycles ago just demonstrates the need and the purpose. And thanks to my colleagues in the city in terms of having at least the foresight to anticipate bringing this to council. So there is a resiliency, but also as well as that we must do this in concert with the private sector, because Rogers is one component of the whole telecommunications industry.
And would you concur that, I mean, this is admittedly my own editorial, although I imagine it's shared by many Canadians, that while I think it would be helpful to have more competition and more options with respect to price and in this context, reliability within the private sector, that if we are rolling out our own network, that we do have the potential to provide a public alternative. And there are cities around the world that have already, ventured in this direction.
Through the chair, you are accurate in the fact that there is a need, and I think the federal government and the ministers have spoken to this publicly. So certainly there is a need for continued increase of competition, the ability to ensure that we're servicing that. In terms of the city of Toronto, I think that, and similar to the rest of the country, it's resiliency, which was part of the report. And so the more we have resiliency, which is fueled by competition, which is fueled by a healthy private and public sector partnership, and the more that more cities are also looking at that resiliency, I think it will be best for Canadians and specifically best for the city of Toronto. Yeah.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Matlow. Seeing no other questioners, we can move to speakers.
No, hold on.
Oh, sorry, did you have some questions as well, Councillor
I
Nancy?
held the item down.
Yeah, I was going to go to speakers in your first.
Yeah.
Did you have questions as well?
I just have questions.
Oh, okay. That was my next job, was to recognize the person who held this motion, which was Speaker Nunziata.
So I have a few questions, and I have them written down. So my understanding is that Rogers and other providers operate private and proprietary internet networks. Because of this, they have no obligation to make the cause of the outage public. Is that true?
Through through the chair, in terms of the proprietary network, that is correct, similar to the telecommunications industry. The comments regarding making it public, I think that would be best placed for the federal government and also through the CRT, where the appropriate jurisdiction lies in terms of how that is provided.
Okay, is it true that Rogers is the main provider of budget internet plans for low-income Torontonians?
Through the chair, Rogers does have a plan in terms of providing it for low income areas, so that would be correct. They do have a plan. There may be some other telecommunications providers that have other plans, but Rogers certainly, in what I actually communicated at the last previous meetings, does have a low income plan that they focus for that group of communities.
So would that mean that these low-income households were also completely cut off?
Through the chair, anyone that was residing on the Rogers telecommunications, whether it was through their smartphone, cellular connection, would have been impacted based on the services that Rogers was providing, similar to the whole country. That is correct.
Okay. Now, would a public-owned network provide more transparency?
Through the chair, I think a public-owned network would certainly have an ability through, in this case, to come to council to probably speak on that. In the view of transparency, I certainly do not want to allude to the fact that the private sector is not being transparent. They've communicated through their CEO statements, but certainly through coming through in this area for a public network, I'm sure that we would have to come to council to speak on that if there was a public-owned infrastructure that we had to speak to that created this downtime.
Okay, so my last question is, what about oversight and accountability? How would this be different in a public-owned network?
I think through the chair, that through oversight and accountability, I think through our procedures in terms of one of it, there would be a steering committee we would look to set with a cross representation of the agencies as well as the City of Toronto and other stakeholders. There would be accountability through the various committee levels, and probably in this case, it would be the General Government Licensing Committee. And there would be accountability and transparency that would come through council in terms of reporting if there was the example being utilized by ConnectTO. So there would definitely be the vehicle within the City of Toronto through council to provide that transparency.
Thank you. That's my.
Those are your questions. I do see another questioner. Councillor Holiday, you had some questions?
I did. They're rather brief, and it's to the city manager. Mr. City Manager, you're being asked to complete this report and bring it to the Executive Committee in the future. And I wondered if you would consider it as an undertaking, so I don't have to suggest an amendment here, that you would consult with the CISO, because I think there's a balance between what we would report to the public and what we would report internally with how our networks are configured and the various service providers that we rely on.
So through the speaker, I think yours is a very important statement, and the simple answer is, of course, our CISO will be involved.
And furthermore, I mean, this speaks to continuity of operations and business continuity and the desire to have a resilient public service, which I'm quite certain everybody in this room would support, but there are reasons why we would not purposefully reveal all of that detail in the public domain to ensure the security of our services.
Through the speaker, I mean, we've learned a lot in a short period of time through the work of the audit committee and the hiring of a highly skilled CISO. So absolutely, we know the importance of protecting our interests, and that's exactly what Abby does. For sure.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Yep.
Okay, that's it for the questions. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Matlow, did you want to speak?
Yes, thanks, Madam Speaker.
Okay, Councillor Matlow to speak.
So, I mean, this conversation, in a way, has been going on for many years in municipalities around the world, and there are countless cities throughout the United States. Here, Amsterdam in Europe is a really good example of cities that have moved forward with municipal broadband. What the Rogers adage did was, I think, really put a focus on the importance um, of having a public alternative, both to ensure that the services that we provide to people, whether it be in our parks, long-term care, and otherwise, are reliable and more predictable, and that we're not beholden to a private company to be able to ensure that we are able to deliver. The cost to us, to Torontonians, I think we need to understand that better, but certainly I think, it's fair to presume that it was significant. And but for the public itself, and this is something, I think we should explore. And, I don't mean to lead us to any one destination. We need to understand what we'd get into, and we need to understand the benefits and negatives. But, many would, I think, make a reasonable argument that like water, like electricity, Wi-Fi, broadband access, these things have become, internet access has become, in essence, like another utility that we rely on in our day-to-day lives. The pandemic made it even more.
Sorry,
necessary.
Councillor Matlow, I'm going to put you on hold just for 1 second.
Sure.
Councillor Perruzza, I appreciate your son is in here, want to watch you in action, but he can't be in the council chambers? Or on the floor. He can be seated. Thank you. Councillor Mallow, continue.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I was just saying that I think we all can agree in many respects that access to internet has become a basic utility that we rely on for our day-to-day lives. In some cases, our safety, certainly our productivity, and it's something that we should entertain for our public. That being said, though, and this is just, aside from the motion, this is my own opinion. I don't think it should ever replace the private sector. And in fact, I want to see a far more competitive space in this country. I imagine many of you feel the same way. I really believe it would contribute to both a better price and reliability for Canadians. But as Speaker Nunziata was alluding to earlier, with respect to transparency, predictability, surety for our services, along with, I should add, contributing to our efforts to bridge the digital divide and ensure that lower income people and others who we, want to serve better have access to the internet to be able to study, work, etc. It's something that we should entertain. And that's why we are, we're asking staff to move forward with at least exploring that option. So I ask you to support this motion, and obviously this is something that I believe is important and necessary regardless of the adage that happened recently. But the adage certainly put into focus just the necessity for our city and Torontonians to have that reliability, which we do not have now. And frankly, I'm still curious to really understand why that adage happened in the first place. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to support the first two components of the report request, which is A and B, and to not support C. And I know it's a long meeting, but I gotta ask to separate the vote on 1C. And my comments are this. I think it's really important that the city thinks about and understands its infrastructure, and I asked some questions about maintaining security around that. And I also think that the city should continue to invest in its business continuity plans and its technology plans and its disaster recovery plans, to make sure that we've got a really resilient system which supports the Toronto government, the Toronto Public Service to do what they need to do. But the third component on this ask is a little different than the first. And that is to talk about a municipally run internet service provision. I mean, counselors, like if you don't have enough things to worry about now, and I just pulled out, open the 311 business intelligence tool, and we can see that road clearing, missing damaged signs and potholes and traffic signals and complaints about investigations or requesting investigations are the top priorities. And that probably reflective of what we understand as counselors and the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Can you imagine if the number one now becomes my internet is out, or I need internet, or it's broken, or it's not fast enough? So I would urge members of council to be very careful with what C is implying, and that is for us to get into the business of supplying internet. So I don't really want to send staff off and write even a report on that. As I said earlier in the council meeting, we always seem to try to be everything to everybody. And I understand coming out of whatever issues occurred recently with technology in the city that people want to search for better ways. But having the government now become a provider is something that I don't think we need to focus on now. We have so many priorities that are in front of us and so many priorities that we went through at this council meeting. So please be very, very careful about where now we send our staff off into yet another direction, and think about what the implication is to our public service to actually execute on that in a way that's meaningful.
Okay, we have one more item left. Councillor Ainsley to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have an amendment. I don't know if clerks have it ready. It's basically, I would like to add the wording at the end of C so that it says, including all potential associated costs and staffing levels for the City of Toronto. I think that's very important to have in front of us. And then, Madam Speaker, saying all of that, we had a very extensive conversation and debate about internet usage and availability at general government and licensing. So although I put that wording forward, I will also ask, and I think Deputy Mayor Holliday asked for C to be separated out because there are a lot of dynamics at play. And I think we heard loud and clear from our staff at general government and licensing that the ultimate goal of ConnectTO is to supplement our infrastructure, but not to have our own unique Wi-Fi or internet system that's going to compete with the Bell and Rogers of the world. We can't do that. It's an incredibly expensive endeavor. If you want to do that, it's not something that's regulated at the municipal level. It's regulated by the federal government. I think we would go down a very expensive road trying to duplicate or compete with the major telecommunication companies in this country. So I will support A and B, but I cannot support C. Thank you very much.
Let's put the motion on screen.
And can we get recorded votes on all of them?
Yes, recorded votes.
So just on a point of order, Madam Speaker, I think more than one member may wish to vote on 1 A and B, and 1C separately.
Okay, so we'll vote on them separately. Which member? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so what is it that you put on the screen now? Councillor Ainsley's amendment?
Counselor Perruzza, may I have your vote, please?
In the affirmative.
Thank you. And Counselor Thompson, may I have? It's the amendment to Part C, as proposed by Counselor Ainsley.
So this is Counselor Ainsley's amendment? All right, so I'll be in the affirmative then.
Thank you. Great. Sorry, Counselor Robinson, I see you now. I'll take your vote verbally, please.
Affirmative?
Thank you. We'll make that update. So the amendment carries. The vote is 17-3.
Counselor Ainsley, this was your amendment that we voted on.
Yep, I'm all good. I didn't want it to pass.
No.
So now we're voting on Part C as amended.
I don't want Part C to pass, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
What? Okay. Okay, on Part C as amended, I think Counselor Ainsley, I don't. Yeah.
Part C is amended.
It's fine, and we'll separate those.
Okay, Part C as amended. Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, on a point of order, I wanted the wording that I added on the table.
No, but you lost it.
But that's fine. That's fine. I got my speech in, I got the motion put forward. I don't want Part C passed as I read it, as I said earlier.
Counselor adopted the amendment to Part C, Counselor Ainsley.
Great, let's move on.
Yeah, could you please? Because I think there's a huge
On the
confusion.
previous vote, it was voting on the amendment as proposed by Counselor Ainsley to Part C. That carried. So now Council is voting on Part C as amended.
So Speaker, this is like a little like your goalie scoring on your own net. You know what I mean? It's simple. Sometimes goalies do that. If Councillor Ainsley wants to score on his own net, he's entitled to do that.
Counselor Mantis, please, and Counselor Bradford, please.
Madam Clerk, just to confirm, Part C, it's basically to ask a report for the cost of the utilization of Connectio.
Yes, Nick.
Okay.
And Counselor Robinson, may we have your vote, please?
Against?
Against? Okay, and Counselor Thompson?
In the negative.
And Counselor Perruzza? This is Clause C as amended, 1C.
He is amended.
Sorry,
I'm in favor of C as amended,
okay, thank you.
because I think Rogers is going to take us seriously here.
Part C as amended carries. The vote is 13-7.
Okay, the balance of the motion, on favor, recorded vote.
Counselor Bailao, please. Counselor Robinson, your vote, please.
Or?
Sorry, that was in favor?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Counselor Thompson?
No.
And Counselor Perruzza?
In the affirmative.
Thank you. The balance of the item as amended carries. The vote is 18-2.
Okay, so we're just now at our last item. Our last item is GL 3219. Counselor Filion, you held the item down.
Thank you. First of all, like to thank the mayor for creating the special meeting for this item. And I understand from the clerk that I need to move it to that meeting on August 15th. And the reason for that, and I could go on for a long time,
Yeah,
but the
can you
reason.
please move your motion first?
Yes, just, if you just put it up, that consideration of the item be deferred to special city council meeting 48 on August 15th, 2022, which the mayor has created to provide this opportunity. The, at least half the controversy related to this item, or what has fueled controversy about it, is the speed with which it has happened, and literally not enough time to answer people's questions about it. So many of those questions are not related to the lease. Some may turn out to be. We still aren't sure. I have had many discussions with staff about this, and they are, I think I can say, okay with this motion. And there will be, this will definitely get voted on August 15th. And I think it will go a lot more smoothly because of the additional time to hold community meetings and have everyone's questions answered. So thank you.
Thank you. So on the motion by Counselor
Madam
Filion,
Speaker, Madam Speaker, if I could, can I question the deferral?
you can speak on the deferral. Do you want to speak on the deferral?
I can't
Okay,
question the
so
mover.
hold on, calm down. Yes, Counselor Layton, you can ask a question on the deferral.
Thank you. My question is simple because I'm not able, I didn't know a deferral was coming, so I'm not able to ask staff this question, but perhaps you know, Councillor Fillion, and I'll trust that you'll provide a straightforward and honest answer.
You bet.
Will this delay people moving in to the hotel?
If it does, it will be for like a very insignificant amount of time, like maybe 2 weeks, but maybe not at all. There is not yet for example, there is, if you look at a timeline chart, this is 4 weeks from now. There has not yet been a provider retained on this one, so there is still a lot of work that can be done over the next 2 weeks that would not have started right away, which it can be all set up so that that can start August 16th. The staff are also planning to very much phase in the moving in of residents so that it would be starting with a small number on September the 6th and with additional people being added. So when you combine those two things, I think there won't be a delay, but if there is, it will be like a few days or a week, and certainly by the end of September or beginning of October, it will be completely all caught up.
Okay, thank you. So on the motion by Councillor Fillion,
I think you have a question of the mover. Am I right about that, or is that?
Councillor Lane.
Oh, sorry.
He
sorry.
already asked the question.
Sorry, I didn't hear his voice.
Do we have any further speakers? No? Okay, so on the motion by Councillor Fillion, on favor?
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Robinson, your vote, please.
Affirmative.
Thank you. And Councillor Perruzza, your vote, please.
This is on the Fillion thing? Yeah, I'm in favor of that. That's okay. Even though I should probably vote against him, but I'm going to support him here on his last motion.
The motion to defer carries. The vote is 17-2.
Okay. Now, members, before we go through the bills, I just want to say, I think this is record-breaking, this council meeting. We have passed 319 bills.
Quick point of order, Madam Speaker. You've done a marvelous job keeping us on track and getting us to do all this work in this very special meeting. I just simply want to, because I never got a chance to say, I want to say goodbye to all those folks who aren't coming back, who are leaving and going off somewhere else. Like, listen, good luck to you. Have a safe summer and enjoy your vacation time. And to everyone else who's going to go out on the hustings and run in the election, friend and foe, I just want to wish them all good luck in that endeavor.
Okay.
Thank you, Speaker.
But we do have to pass the bills. So members, before I ask for motion to enact the general bills, may I have a motion regarding the consideration of submissions on zoning bylaw and official plan amendments? Councillor Perks.
hard to.
being on the planning committee.
Thank you. I move that committee and council considered submissions in making a decision on zoning bylaw and official plan amendments.
All in favor? Show of hands carried. May I have a motion to introduce the general bills? Moved by Counselor Holliday.
That leave be granted to introduce bills 759 to 782, 784, 841, and 843 to 1,078.
All those,
Recorded vote, Speaker, recorded vote on that, please.
well, we do the last one recorded. All those in favor? Carried. Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Now, this, we can have a recorded
Recorded
vote.
vote, Speaker.
May I have a motion to
So
introduce?
moved.
Huh? May I have a motion? Yeah, okay. No, I have one more. No. There's a motion to introduce the confirming bill. Yeah. The last one, we're gonna have a recorded vote on the last. Okay. So,
And I want to move that one, Speaker.
yeah, okay, Anthony, hold on. No, then I told him and then he said, okay, so, yeah, okay. So may I have a motion to introduce the confirming bill? Okay, Anthony?
So moved.
No, you have to get up and read what's on
sure.
the screen.
Okay, I'm happy to do that.
He actually is logged out, he doesn't have a screen.
Yeah, just show, oh yeah, I'll read right there.
It's on,
That leave be granted to introduce a bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council meeting 47 on July 19, 20, 21, and 22, 2022, Speaker.
okay, shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? All those in favor, opposed if any, carried. Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Recorded vote, Speaker.
Oh, yeah, why don't you do it? Chris, go. Go. Come on, Chris. Oh, you have to read the results. Read the results of the vote.
Counselor Robinson, please.
In the affirmative?
Thank you. Counselor Thompson, please. Oh, sorry, I thought he was behind me. Never mind. Counselor Pertza.
Counselor
please.
Thompson left.
Counselor Pertza.
In the affirmative, Speaker.
Thank you. Oh, Counselor Fillion, please.
In the affirmative.
Thank you.
The vote carries unanimously 20-0. Congratulations.
Now, members of council, please join me in thanking the staff for the work and, well, not just this past week, the last council meeting, but for the past 4 years. Thank you very much to staff, all the staff that are here, greatly appreciated. And to members of council, thank you, and we'll see you, I guess, on the next council meeting. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, could I present a special gift to the clerk's office for their excellent work? And you can
Absolutely.
imagine what they are. It is my way of saying thank you to them from some friends that I live with in my backyard.